Madam Chairman, I unfortunately left my, agenda at home.
Sorry?
I left my agenda at home.
Left your agenda at home?
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for.
Okay. Welcome to this meeting of the Maidenhead Development Management Committee on the 29th of May 2025. My name is Councillor Sian Martin and I will be chairing this meeting. This meeting is held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask you to leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside of the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role they're undertaking. So if I start by going to my left.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Louise Reid. My role is Deputy Head of Planning. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Eastham. I'm the Principal Planning Officer in the Majors team.
Councillor Hill, I'm a voting member of the panel.
Councillor Helen Taylor, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Gurj Singh, voting member of the panel. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Councillor Jack Douglas, voting member of the panel.
Chloe Plummer, Democratic Services Officer.
Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Service Officer and Clerk to the committee. Just to note, Chair, we also have Katrina Herbert Legal online as well.
Thank you. I request that the meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I may use the powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I'd like to remind all councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I'd ask you to please limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've had an apology for absence from Councillor Kashmir Singh. However, he is going to attempt to join the meeting virtually. He is well aware that if he attends virtually, though, he is unable to vote on any applications tonight, but he is welcome to contribute to the debates.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Taylor?
Just for transparency, the site on both the applications on Norreys Road sits in my ward and I am the ward councillor.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Are we happy to approve the minutes of the last meeting, Thursday, the 15th of May? Agreed. Councillor Hill, did you want to come in on? Did you want to come in on the declarations of interest or?
Have I got a declaration of interest just because I'm a ward councillor? Makes no difference, does it? No.
So that moves us on to our next agenda item, which is item number 4, Highway House, Norreys Road, Maidenhead, planning out for 23/03162. So if I could hand over to the officers to do the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. There are two applications this evening, basically for the same site, Highway House. The first one is a planning application for 2 apartment buildings for 76 units altogether. On that, there's been an update sheet circulated from the lead local flood authority. They're asking if condition 9, the wording of the condition, can be replaced with a more updated, robust condition. Our response is yes, and it meets the 6 tests for imposing conditions as set out in the NPPF December 2024. The next is the overview of the recommendation itself. The application site falls within an identified protected employment site in policy ED2 of the local plan. The LPA is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the tilted balance applies. The development should be approved unless the harms arising are significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme when taken as a whole. The issue is the loss of office use. This is a protected employment site. So basically on that, the loss of office, it's been confirmed that the market of the site has been ongoing for at least the last 12 months, as required by policy ED3 in the borough local plan. It's been marketed both online with local agents and the display of a full colour roadside hoarding. No interest whatsoever. In addition, there's been an inspector's decision. It's the one at Maidenhead Office Park, Westcott Way, in Little Wick Green, where the inspector highlighted the council's position. There is now a surplus of vacant office space on the borough with little prospect of short to medium term relets. Any medium term returns, growth in office sector can be met through town centre redevelopment. The loss of the appeal site would not cause any fundamental issues to the supply of offices in the borough. And that is equally applicable to this site on the site of Highway House off Norreys Drive. Norreys, the actual Highway House, as you'll know, the building has been demolished. It's a brownfield site, sustainable location. We've received no objections whatsoever from local residents or statutory consultees to this application. And in terms of harm then, is not of a significant or demonstrable in nature. Therefore, it's recommended that planning permission be approved with a section 106 and conditions. So that's the overview, members. In terms of proposed development, we've got this proposed site plan here. It's the erection of 2 buildings on the site, which provide 76 apartments, 30% affordable. So that's 23 units affordable. Those would be social rented. So you'll pick up a need immediately. The car parking, landscaping, and amenity space. Both buildings will be 7 stories. The buildings will be approximately 20 metres high, 19.9 metres high. And the development would use the existing vehicular access of Norreys Drive. As I just said, the 23 affordable, social rented. Again, you'll see in a minute some images. The proposed event is a contemporary design which would add to the locality. The scheme comprises a flat roof design and distinct external design features used to incorporate massing and increase the overall visual interest in the area next to the Volvo building and Clarion House on Norreys Drive. We're using a varied materials palette, including dressed stone, brick, and aluminium cladding. The 2 proposed buildings, although extending beyond 4 and 2 stories, would actually add to the context and provide height and massing to this part of Norreys Drive, which we as officers support. In summary, the proposed apartment buildings, although extending beyond 4 stories, would not dwarf the commercial buildings either side. They set a positive precedent, thereby enhancing the character of the area. Proposed design is considered to be of acceptable quality, and the finished appearance would also be of a high quality and would not detract, but actually enhance the local character of the area. In terms of specific matters, councillors, go through the materials now, contemporary additions. So you see materials palette below. It's basically at base, you've got stone cladding, then you've got brick above, a yellow multi-brick, with standing seam to the upper floors and the roofing. Basically, the proposed footprints, the 2-story buildings, are similar to that of the extant office scheme from 2008. An office building benefits from an open, flat plate, large number of openings on a number of sides of the building. Proposed would not result in material loss of amenity, and it would not harm the ongoing use of both Volvo House and Clarion House. This is an actual view of the two buildings. So you can see you've got the stone at the base, you've got the brick and the cladding. Similar to other buildings, we think it fits in a sustainable location in the office park. Residential mix comprises 12 one-bed, two-person apartments, 56 two-bed, three-person apartments, and 8 two-bed, four-person apartments. And all of the rooms, all of the apartments themselves, one and two bed, all meet the nationally described space standards. There is more than sufficient space in those. Obviously, it's acknowledged that the strategic housing market assessment generally requires housing schemes to include 3-bed and 4-bed units. But on this site, it's confined, it's restricted. We're looking at 1 and 2 bed, and we think on balance, it would work on this site. Notwithstanding this, due regard is given to the size context, would be to provide typical amenities associated with larger units, for example, a private garden. The applicant has, however, included larger 2-bedroom, 4-person units within the scheme, which would help overcome the need to provide the 3-bed apartments. We've talked about the 23 affordable units. We're not talking about shared ownership or affordable rent, they are social rent, which is something that we need badly in the borough. The applicant is seeking a partnership with a registered provider as well for those units, which is really promising. And so we talked about the space standards, but more importantly, in terms of M42 provision and M43 provision, we're looking at M43. That scheme's with wheelchair access. The applicant is proposing a total of 6 of those, which is 2 more than the policy compliance. So we're actually getting more in terms of wheelchair access M43, which is a bonus, a benefit of the scheme itself. These are just shots of the floor plans, showing basically that all of those units comply with the space standards and where everything is. Now, in terms of transport and highways, we're looking at section 106 contributions and section 278, section 38 of the Highways Act 1980. We're just going to go through those with you. In terms of the 106, we're looking at a commitment to pay contributions to secure 2 new bus shelters with live timing displays within, and a proportionate contribution towards the improvement to Schopenhangers Road and Norreys Drive, and a commitment to implement and monitor a robust travel plan to encourage residents to use alternative modes of transport. This has bus stops opposite and on the same side. We're looking at bus shelters, and there's a cycleway that is literally on the pavement in front of the site. It's a highly sustainable location. It's on the route to the railway station too, and the Elizabeth line. In terms of section 278, we're looking at necessary improvements to the existing main vehicle access with new pedestrian footways linking up with the existing footways on Norreys Drive. New tactile crossing for connections to the bus stops, and a commitment by the developer to undertake traffic regulation order in the form of double yellow lines added along the northern and southern sides of Norreys Drive, and including the site access junction with the access with Volvo on Concord Road. And also electric vehicle charging points will be provided, and these will be conditioned. These are provided for the parking spaces. So it's a highly sustainable location, and then all these benefits on top of accommodating the apartments within the wider transport network. And these are the proposed pedestrian improvements. We're looking at tactile paving to cross the bus stops, and a length of footway as well on the southern side of Norreys Drive to enable pedestrians to access the site itself. In terms of flood risk, we talked about the update sheet and the lead local flood authority. The site is wholly within flood zone 1. The application has been accompanied by a comprehensive surface drainage report and a flood risk assessment produced in December 23. The drainage strategy comprises discharge into the sewer network, and due to the lack of open space around the site, attenuation basins and infiltration cannot be implemented, so we're looking at tanks underneath. We're happy with that, as is the lead local flood authority. The condition would cover that, and the flood risk assessment has been appraised by them, been found to be acceptable, and ensuring proposed development would not result in increased flooding in other areas and would adopt the appropriate mitigation measures on the site to ensure the development would be adequately protected throughout the lifetime of the development. Sustainability, with our sustainability SPD, which has been adopted by the council. We're looking here at policy SP2, and the initiatives include the development is designed and constructed to meet Part L 2029 of the building regs, the fabric first approach. The design of the apartment buildings would reduce energy demand through maximising solar gain, wind sheltering, and mitigating heat island effects. And there'd be a low carbon fuel source. Heat pump technology would also be fitted to both of the apartment block buildings. And this is a recommendation of the conditions required to achieve that. In terms of infrastructure delivery, we've spoken about the highway works, the 30% affordable social rent, and the biodiversity net gain provision of almost 50%, 49.16% biodiversity net gain, which is another benefit of the scheme itself. In terms of conclusion, we've got on the left the benefits, on the right the harms. The benefits include provision of purpose-built housing, valuable contribution to the delivery of the borough's housing numbers. We're talking, we have a tilted balance, we have a desperate housing need. These 76 units will go a long way to addressing that. All provision of sustainably constructed apartments, provision of EV charging points, ability for the site to be built out and delivered relatively quickly, provision of ecological enhancements, including the 50% biodiversity net gain, creation of employment in the construction of these 76 apartments, incidental expenditure during the construction and occupation of them, and incidental expenditure with house moves of future occupants, removal companies, solicitors, household fixtures and fittings, etc. The only harm is the housing mix does not absolutely accord with the SPD, but in terms of what and where and the benefits in terms of the size of those units and the wheelchair access to, they're all benefits. Tilted balance, members. When decision takers apply the tilted balance, the threshold for refusing development is much higher. Decision takers would need to be able to clearly demonstrate the benefits of development are outweighed by the harms that are both significant and demonstrable. Officers have considered the benefits of the proposed development as a whole, and when weighing these benefits against the impacts of the development, officers conclude that these impacts do not outweigh the benefits. Therefore, planning permission is recommended for approval with conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Before I open this up to the floor, we've got a speaker on this one, and that's Douglas Bond. So if I could call you up to the desk there at the front when you're ready, press the right button. The right one. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is an unattractive, unused brownfield site within Maidenhead that has remained undeveloped for the last 14 years. The lack of building on the site and the absence of an active use means the site detracts from the surrounding area. No purpose is served leaving the site in this state. Planning policies encourage us all to make effective use of such opportunities to meet important land use needs. The applicant has confirmed and your officers agree that the site has been unsuccessfully marketed for a new office building over a considerable period. As you've heard, the council's own evidence also confirms that there is no need or demand for a new office building here either. In these circumstances, the proposed development has demonstrated accordance with local plan policy ED3 in justifying the loss of office floor space through up-to-date market evidence, even though there is no office floor space on the site. As such, the release of the site to other non-employment-based uses is considered acceptable. The proposed new homes will make an important contribution to the council's housing land supply which is currently in deficit, on a sustainably located site within Maidenhead. Officers confirm that the proposed residential use is therefore considered to be acceptable. In addition, the proposal is a affordable housing-led scheme, with all 30% of the proposed affordable housing being set aside for social rent. Officers confirm that this social rent offer is in excess of policy and adds the substantial weight to providing much-needed new homes in the borough. The scale of the proposed building reflects that of the approved office building. There are images in your officer's report making that comparison, and accords with your policy QP3 in respect to scale, height and massing. The high quality design will make a positive addition to the area. The relationship of the proposed building to all neighbouring uses is now acceptable. As you've heard, the quality of the proposed accommodation in terms of unit size, aspect, daylight, sunlight and amenity space have all been agreed and found to be acceptable and consistent with policy. All other technical issues have been addressed with no objections from statutory and internal consultees or local residents. The council's affordable housing need and general housing land supply deficit point towards the need for this proposed residential scheme. These shortfalls reinforce the merits and case for the proposal, such the scheme has substantial merit and I hope can be supported, consistent with the officer recommendation for approval. And I have to say that comprehensive officer presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Before I open this up to debate, we're going to start with a Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions of the officers on this development, go ahead and press your button. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like some clarification on a couple of things in the report that I got a little confused about because they seem to contradict itself. So I'd just like some clarification, if that's okay. In regards to the, I've got loads of points, I'll try and work out where I am in here. The social housing aspect that's initially spoken about in 1.5. It mentioned something about the heads of term, but the heads of term don't really, I couldn't see anything in there about the conflict that I've seen in there, because I read in the report that all the social housing is going to be in Block A. And then it mentioned in Block B, it would be all affordable housing. So I'm just a little confused because I thought the affordable housing was social. You can see where the confusion's come in, if that could just be clarified.
I'm happy to. But basically, yeah. Apologies if the report's confusing, but we're looking at social rent, which is a form of affordable. So it's going to be affordable housing 30% in Block B. I think it's all in Block B. Yeah.
So where it says in Block A that it's all going to be social.
Social rent is affordable.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's saying that, so we've got Block A and Block B, which are the two blocks.
Yes, the two blocks.
So is it all affordable is what I'm asking, because that's how it appears from the report.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to step in there. I understand there's been some discussions about this, but actually, in terms of the application itself, what's being secured is affordable just, well, social rent just in Block B, which is the one at the back. I'm right, aren't I?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just Block B, but Block A might have been mentioned because there has been some discussions that this might end up going to an RP anyway. But
Right, okay.
we
so
didn't really cover it in the report because that's not a certainty. And
Okay, so
you
as it
can't- you can't
stands-
actually take it into account because it's not.
that's why
it's
I was
not-
confused. So as
Yeah,
it stands
so
at
I
the
think
moment.
perhaps that's maybe where it's come from.
No, I read it. Sure, read it. I've written it down in my notes.
Have you?
Yeah.
I don't know then. It definitely is Block B and that's what
Okay.
the 106 would secure.
That's why I was so confused.
That's all right.
The other point I'd like to clarification on is around the allocation of social housing. 'Cause it mentions in the report 45% social. Obviously, we've got 30. And the speakers just said that what they're giving us is in excess. So again, a little bit confused with the.
The policy itself requires 30% affordable at the total number of dwellings
Right,
in Maidenhead. Obviously, it differs between Maidenhead in Windsor and Ascot, because the policy splits it between the two. Of that 30%, you then have another split.
yeah,
So you're then looking at 45% social rent of the 30%. Does that make
right,
sense?
okay, yeah, that's
Does
where
that
the-
help?
Yeah,
Whereas in this instance, instead of having 45% of 30% of the total number, we've got 100% of the 30% as social rent.
yeah.
Does
brilliant.
that make sense?
Yes,
So
that now
that's why
makes
it's a
sense.
good offer.
Yeah,
Um, oh, right, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, that's exactly it. Michael was just showing where the confusion might have come in, so.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Another question I had was around the section 106 contributions for the junction on Hangers and Norreys Drive. Because one of the things I picked up on was obviously the traffic, the report, in the report, it mentions about the traffic probably won't be any more than what it is currently because of, obviously it's a commercial park. So there's people coming and going all the time. But it did occur to me that the flow is going to be reversed. So if you've got a residential, people are going to be leaving in the morning, coming back in the evening, which is in direct opposition to what's going on currently. So I was going to ask if any modelling had been done on the double roundabouts to see if that would affect the traffic flow, because there's quite a short distance from the what will be the access road into the site and the junction. And obviously you might get it backing up and causing all sorts of issues with the, you know, people trying to leave, people trying to get in. So I was just going to ask if the section 106 contribution, if any discussions have already been had specifically on upgrading the roundabouts to cope with that, or is it just a general, they've agreed to give money and we just haven't decided what we're going to do with it yet?
I think in the report under infrastructure, we've got under the section 278 Highway Acts, actually
Yes.
contributions towards the junction.
It
and
says,
towards
yes, the
Schopenhauer, yeah.
junction.
And that's, we've been working, basically we've spent the last 2 years, I understand, on these applications.
Mhm.
And LSG has been actually involved in the highways in terms of what needs to be made. Not just in terms of footways and cycleways, but in terms of contributions to the highway junction. And that's the junction we're looking at, Schopenhauer's. And that's in the heads of terms.
So we can be confident that should the application be approved,
Yes.
that modelling will be done to figure out what the best use.
It should have to be.
Yeah, okay,
It would
that's
have to be
fine.
as part of any works.
Yep.
Yeah, it would have to. Thank you, councillor.
I think that was it. Thank you.
Any other points, councillor Taylor, before I move on to councillor Douglas? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And just the other thing, the measuring, are we using, in the report, it mentions a 7-storey building, which is, it's 8 stories, isn't it, including the basement? That's right, isn't it? It's 8, including the underground parking. So the measurements have been done in metres, because obviously the building to the left and the building to the right are 4 stories.
20 metres. We're looking at 20 metres.
So it's all 20, it's all in metres.
19.9 metres.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Taylor. Councillor Douglas?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's easy to pop up that useful table. Can we have the table of benefits and harms up on the screen?
Yeah. There's only one harm in there.
There were none.
No, there's only one harm. It's just harm is just how you mix.
Well, let's wait and see. We'll find out.
I'm looking at just about.
Thanks.
This table here.
That's lovely. So I've got a quick question about that table. So the harm you've got there is the mix of dwelling sizes, where the report basically says that's acceptable, that harm. So that's what Officer Howard officers are presenting it, but we also have the loss of employment space, which the report also says is acceptable. I'm just my query is just why isn't the loss of employment space listed there? Whether it's acceptable or not, it's still a harm, isn't it?
Basically, I think the applicant, I think that's been justified. The loss of employment space has been justified. And then the next one is the balance of why it doesn't match the strategic housing multi-assessment figures.
Are you saying that the dwelling mix has not been justified?
No, basically, we've got to balance it. It's a balancing act in terms, and what we've done in the report and what we've done with the determination of the application is the housing, the actual number of bed spaces does not comply fully with the SHMA. So we're saying what the applicant's done is provided larger 2-bed, and we think that's acceptable. Looking at the restrictive size of that site, looking at that site as well, with nothing on the moment. That is all. That's a positive. As planners, we have to balance that up. But that's the harm. It doesn't comply with the SHMA.
So just to explain that again. So the balance of dwelling sizes is a harm. It's identified there on your list. It's acceptable. I mean, we'll come to that later. But in the report, it's considered acceptable. The loss of employment space, i.e., the non-policy. I mean, it's an employment zone.
Just going to step in there. The reason that the loss of employment is not put in the scales is because the policy allows for it if there is no demand. And they've evidenced through a lot of marketing that absolutely no one is interested in taking that site forward for office use. So they've met the requirements of the policy, so they're not in conflict with the policy. So we haven't put it on the harm side because there is no conflict. It's where there's conflict with the policy that we all weigh it up and around in terms of the benefits and harm. Because if it's not in conflict with the policy, then that isn't an issue. Whereas when Michael mentioned about the housing mix, obviously the policy requires a certain number of units that's informed by the SHMA. So, and that we can't quite meet that with this site because of the site constraints. But notwithstanding, it's still providing a housing mix that meets our needs, and it is providing a number of social rented accommodation on top of that. So that's where the balancing act comes in, and that's why it's being included in the harm, because that's actually not policy compliant. Well, it's more of a technicality, I think, really, but it's still on the balancing because it doesn't comply.
Yes.
So that's where your tilted balancing measuring comes in there.
The policy has a get out for in certain circumstances for the employment area, so it's actually policy compliant because of, or in terms of the employment zone, it's policy compliant because there's no demand for officers in that area. That's what you're saying. That's why it's not in the harms.
Essentially, there's a series of tests that need to be gone through in order to demonstrate there isn't a demand. And if there isn't a demand, the policy doesn't insist on it only being that use. If there's clear evidence that nobody wants that use in that location.
That's in contrast to the dwelling size mix, which is a clear breach of policy. But
dwelling sizes in their own right are good. They meet the space standards. It's the size of the units in terms of bedroom numbers.
3, 4 bedroom, whatever. Yeah. Okay. And does the same apply to building heights? We have a policy about how high buildings should be, and the context height here is being breached, but it's not a policy breach. That's what you're saying. That's why it's not in that list.
I think that's because we take into account the adjoining buildings and the immediate context in this case.
Which are not so tall.
Pardon?
They're not as tall.
They're not as tall, but they're still taller buildings. There isn't very much difference in scale because the floor to ceiling height in residential tends to be lower than floor to ceiling height in office buildings, because in office buildings you get drop ceilings to allow for ducting and all that kind of thing, and you obviously don't in residential. So generally speaking, the floor to ceiling heights are higher and therefore increase the height of the building. So the office buildings might be 4 stories high compared with this one at 7, but the building in its own right will have higher floor to ceiling heights, so it will make the building taller. So in terms of the context, it's not so much the story height as the building heights.
Yeah, the
of
building's
the
high,
adjoining
the building's
properties.
taller than the adjacent
Yeah,
buildings.
it
so,
is,
yeah.
but that's really a weighing up exercise in terms of, does that additional height cause harm that would meet the significant and demonstrable test?
But this isn't a column of significant demonstrable harms, this is a column of harms,
Yeah, it is.
and
I
it's
mean,
not on there.
I think that's because it's a judgment call rather than a policy compliant call. What we have there
That's
is the
fine.
list of policy
That's fine, I understand what you're
compliance.
saying, I'm just,
And officers
really,
haven't,
partly I'm curious, at what point would you, so say this was a 14-storey building?
well, then that clearly wouldn't be within context, you know, it would
Okay, so there
stand
is a
out.
policy about it being within context, and you're saying this is just the right side rather than just the wrong side, so it's not on the harms
Again,
list.
you're looking at tilted balance here, so you're looking at,
Tilted balance comes in afterwards, we've got the list of harms here, and then we consider tilted balance. We
if you
can't,
want, you know, if in your considerations you want to add building scale into the harms, that's your gift.
I'm
So
just,
this isn't, this
that's
is
fine,
not.
that's fine, I understand, that's
Yeah,
good.
so
I'm
you
just
can
asking whether this
consider that.
table might be more useful if it had both kinds of harms there, like the minor ones that perhaps aren't policy breaches. It might be helpful to have them just listed, the other 2 or 3 that might, you know, just to help
I
us when
think
we're
the
doing our
issue here,
consideration.
sorry, I'm not turning my mic off. I think the issue here is the officer's view is that it doesn't cause harm. Obviously, members are entitled to take a different view on something that is somewhat of a judgment call in terms of scale and massing. So I'll leave that with you,
All right,
and you
we'll
can
leave it
treat
there.
it as having greater weight than we have.
I'm not saying I will or I won't,
That's-
I'm just wondering
it's-
what
scale
the
and massing
criteria is to get on that list.
is, you know, it is bigger than the neighbouring buildings. There's no dispute about that. It does have a greater mass than the adjacent buildings. It's about weighing that up in the round in terms of the
Yeah.
benefits, working out whether it makes that
Yeah,
significant.
I mean, my feeling is that putting them in the list of harms and then saying these got low weight would be more helpful for the committee than not having them there at all. But I
Okay,
mean, that's
but
just a
we'll
matter of
take
opinion as
note
well.
of that. Thank you,
Okay,
Councillor
thank you,
Douglas.
thanks, Shan.
Thank you. Mike, I was wondering if you could stop sharing your screen and I can go to Councillor Waters and then. Should be a stop button somewhere. You can, yeah, I think Mike is on it. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple of points, if I may. The supply, the housing supply, that always used to be very important, was it? You've got to keep the 5 years and so on. We're at, what are we at, 4.76, I think. Is that still in vogue nowadays? Is it on appeals and so on? That you've got to have a 5-year supply, otherwise you've had it?
I bring Louise in for you, Councillor Waters.
Actually, our 5-year housing supply, the last recorded figure was 4.47. Our policy team is currently in the process of updating that because that figure was from, I think, last year or early this year. And they're looking to update it, but the expectation is that it will be lower, which is quite normal considering that our plan is now 3 years old and a lot of the allocations have come forward and we have planning permission on them. So, you know, as they come forward and they get built out, you run out of sites basically.
Yeah.
And that's what we're starting to see. So in terms of the 5-year housing land supply, that is essential. We need to demonstrate that we have that.
Yeah.
And if we don't have it, then unless the site is an exception, meets one of the exceptions in the MPPF, then the tilted balance kicks in, which is what a bit we were talking about last night, is when do you apply it? So that's why the 5-year housing supply is so important, because if you have it, you have flat balance and it's nice and
You have
straightforward.
what?
You have something called flat balance, so it's much easier to weigh up the harms and the benefits.
Yeah.
Whereas when you've got tilted balance, which is what we've got at the moment, you need an enormous amount of harm to outweigh the benefits. It's a different level of test. So that's why the 5-year housing land supply is so important. And yes, it's very, very relevant to us.
And
Does that help?
it helps. And the other thing that I'm always a bit hazy about is that what is the point in time when you take that that figure there must be a certain date when you, what's the magic of that? Excuse me.
What, in terms of the value of the figure?
Yeah, you say 4.7. When was it 4.7?
It was 4.7, I think, at the end of last year, beginning of this year. We're getting towards 6 months down the line from when it was last calculated. It will be lower.
All right.
It will progressively get lower until we get a new plan out.
But is there
But
a
the
mechanism?
speed at which it goes down is dependent on how many permissions we grant that we believe can be built out within that 5-year period. That's the target. So smaller schemes such as this will almost certainly get built out within the 5 years and therefore counts. The bigger sites, such as the golf club site, that's a much larger site with, 1,500
Okay.
dwellings.
Yeah.
That will not be built out in 5 years. So you can only count a little bit of that.
Right.
Whereas this one is the whole lot.
Is there a time when you take that? Is it every 6 months, every 12 months, or just, any old month?
In terms of 5-year supply,
Yes.
well, we do it for the annual monitoring report, which is done once a year. But because we now don't have a 5-year supply, we
Don't
do
have
ask
what?
policy to.
Can
Can
you
you,
speak
can you
up a
hear me?
bit?
Can you
Yeah.
hear me very well?
Not very well. No,
Sorry,
no,
I'll
can.
try to slow down and
Yeah,
speak
yeah.
up. We are required to calculate our 5-year supply
Yeah.
every year for the
Every
annual
year,
monitoring
okay.
report. However, we're currently doing it more frequently
Okay.
because we have to use it at planning appeal.
All
So
right.
therefore, we try to get a more up-to-date figure. So maybe doing it every 4 to 6 months rather than once a year.
Okay. Thank you. That's.
But it takes time to calculate it, so it's quite a lot of work.
Okay. The other thing is I see not so long ago, in 23, 76 apartments was refused. What's the background to that?
Yeah,
Two buildings.
Councillor, thanks for that. In terms of so what happened was there were 76 apartments on the applied for, and that was dismissed. But what's happened since, the applicant has actually worked on the reasons for refusal. Those included, in terms of the issues like there was no air quality assessment wasn't submitted. It was a larger building that has been taken into account, and there were windows on certain elevations overlooking. The design's been amended accordingly. And in terms of issues such as affordable housing, that's taken a step forward as well. So all the issues raised by the inspector have actually been addressed. All those reasons for refusal have been addressed. What we tried to do in the report is actually go through it and go through the reasons for refusal and show how the applicants actually addressed all of those, made it policy compliant. And that's why we've come to the conclusion to recommend approval, especially and with a tilted balance too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, please.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions. I just wanted to, actually, a good point you raised about that air quality assessment. I just wanted to ask you about that. I know there's a condition in here. In the report, I was trying to look for the air quality. It's only a small section. It's only like a couple of lines really. 10.176. It says the application is supported by an air quality assessment that has been appraised by council's environment health officers. Then you sort of go on and say the assessment demonstrates that air quality would not be a constraint for the proposed development. The conclusion is acceptable, blah, blah. Just 10.176 and 10.177 under the heading air quality, second and third paragraphs. Just wanted to ask you about that. Are you comfortable with the air quality and the condition? And can you tell me a bit of detail about the condition?
Councillor, really good points. In terms of the report, if we go into the detail, the report will be too long.
Don't detail, just tell me.
What we've tried to do is basically the assessment, we're satisfied. We've put it to the council's environmental health officer, Michael McNaughton. Michael studied it at length. He's satisfied. He's come forward with a condition The conditions in the report itself,
There's
we
nothing
are,
there.
yeah, basically, the air condition, the air report condition is there. And we are convinced that that overcomes the reason for refusal on the apartments for the previous scheme. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So,
Thank you,
so
Councillor.
Michael, if we come back on that bit there, the condition 24, air quality assessment, it says the development hereby approved shall be delivered in compliance with the mitigation measures set out in the approved air quality assessment.
Yes, Councillor, that is a compliance condition.
Yes.
So the air quality assessment sets out a number of recommendations that the builder will have to comply with to ensure it meets that. And we're saying this must, basically, when it's built, it must comply with those recommendations and mitigation measures in the air quality
Can
assessment.
you give me some of the specific measures that are in there or not?
I've not got a copy of the air quality assessment with me.
Not the whole list. I mean, I've got the assessment on the computer. It's in the.
I'm
it's on the
sorry,
planning board,
I'm not.
but just a
I can't do
specific.
that, but yeah.
No.
yeah.
You don't. Okay.
I was just going to jump in there
Yeah, sure,
because
Louise.
you could go and check the application on public access because the air quality report will be on there.
Yeah.
It's public
I've
document.
read it on there, but I just wanted to. I couldn't see the specific points on there. That I mean, we can tweak that if we want to anyway.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course we
if we
can.
want. I'll have a look at it because I couldn't, because I would sort of, as a condition, I would sort of like to see some specific points on there. It's easier for the
I mean,
applicant.
we can amend the condition to make it more specific if you feel that would be helpful.
Thank you. And the other, just a quick one about the landscaping. Can you just give me any detail? I didn't see much in the presentation. Normally you get detail about the sort of green infrastructure and sort of the enhancements on site. Is there anything specific that you can talk about in terms of like green roofs, green walls and sort of, I don't know, birch trees or anything to?
We're in, the site is highly constrained, so we are recommending a landscaping condition to be imposed on it. Yeah, in terms of planting. Yeah, we're doing that, and that's in the report itself.
And we can talk about specifics, can't we?
We can do at that stage.
There's nothing outlined at the moment, is there?
No,
Okay,
and I
okay.
think we have picked up on sustainability measures in terms of the build and so on. As Michael said, the site's quite restricted.
It is restricted. It's very restricted,
Yeah,
isn't it? It's
it
very
is. I
restricted,
mean,
yeah.
there is amenity provided to the flats in terms of balconies and so on. But in other ways, the actual land available is limited. I mean, it is near open space.
Yes,
Within walkable distance of open space and so forth. But in terms of greening measures, no, there's no proposed green roofs or anything like that. And they do require quite a lot of maintenance as well, and upkeep and reseeding and so on. But saying that, you know, it's not something that's being explored, but they are providing other sustainable measures such as, you know, air source heat pumps and the like.
No. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but
Thank
we're
you.
more than happy, if you want to have that tightened up, we can do that.
Yeah. I'll have a think. Thank you very much. Just thank you.
I'm just interested, Madam Chairman, on the conditions, they have to have these heat pumps, do they? This is one of the conditions.
Yeah, I believe it is a condition, is it?
Well, I guess it's condition 12.
Is there something you wanted to know about those heat pumps, councillor Walters? Did you have a question about them?
Yeah, I just want, do you have to have them? Is it mandatory or can you not have them?
We're encouraging air source heat pumps. We're encouraging green roofs. We want to see more of them. So what we've done, the applicants actually submitted those, they've come in. So what we're trying to make it is a compliance condition, condition 12, yes.
It is.
Condition 12 does exactly that. Yeah, to be submitted, prior to approval. And further details. So we want more of these, councillor. We want far more in terms of, we've got a climate change crisis. We've all signed up to that. We want to see all developers coming with alternative sources of heat and renewables on their developments from apartments to care homes to offices. So this is part of the real drive.
Do the people want the things? Do the tenants or the lessees want?
I think everybody does. I think everybody's committed to address climate change. Everyone wants alternative forms of renewable energy to actually achieve that.
Everybody doesn't want heat pumps. I'm just wondering whether I just want to know whether that's mandatory or just a choice.
I think, councillor Waters, most modern buildings are going down that way. They certainly are on the continent and in this country now as well.
I can't hear what you say.
Most modern buildings are going down that road with heat
I
pumps.
know they're going down
it's
the
a
road, but
good
is
thing.
it mandatory?
I think it's a good thing to be doing that.
Is it?
For climate reasons, definitely. Mm. Yeah.
It is mandatory.
Yeah, we have policies and we have within SPDs, we encourage the provision of air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, greening alternatives, which councillor Singh mentioned, photovoltaics, the whole range of renewable energy sources as far as we're able to, recycling of grey water, that kind of thing. Not all developments will have everything, but what we try to do is encourage and support any developers that want, that are willing to go ahead and meet that, deliver those objectives.
But
So,
if I was
and they
gonna-
are in this case, they're providing a number of different
I
measures.
can't hear what you say, unfortunately.
Sorry.
It's maybe my fault. I'm just saying, if I was a would-be lessee in those block of flats and I didn't want heat pumps, would I say I want my, normal, like I've got my own flat? I've got those other things, what do they call them, combined heaters or something?
I think councillor Waters, most buildings are going this way. It's quite
Most
normal.
buildings might, but is it really mandatory?
Yeah. I'm just going to bring Catriona in from legal. Councillor Waters.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I just think we're getting slightly away from the planning application. I understand Councillor Walters' questions, but they're not pertinent to the application that's before you. There's the developers offered air source heat pumps. The officers have conditioned air source heat pumps. There may be some personal views about air source heat pumps, but they're not strictly speaking mandatory from a legal point of view, but they are part of this application.
Thank you. They're not mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Catriona. I know I'd want a heat pump in my house if I had the choice, but anyway. Councillor Hill, please.
That was quick. Thank you very much, Chairman. I think it's all been very ably covered by officers and also the councillors alike. For my part, I'm going to put down a motion to approve this, agreeing with the officer recommendation. I can't really see any reason not to. I'm a little concerned of a block of flats in between office blocks on Norreys Drive. That does concern me somewhat, but for me, I think the developer's done a good job on the design at least. If it goes through, I hope the build lives up to the expectations. My only concern is it's between two other office blocks, but as the site has been up for sale or occupancy for a considerable time, or the legal limit, then my view is I think we should let it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Taylor, did you have more questions?
No, I was going for the debate. I might have pressed my button a bit
I think
early.
most people have done with the questions anyway. There was a break, so go ahead. You're next.
Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm quite torn with this application. I'm going to start with the positive points first. I think positive's always good. It is in a sustainable location. I'm really pleased to see the money being put aside for bus shelters and the tactile paving and the pavement improvements. I totally agree that it's on a bus route. It's right next to the A404 with good access to the M4 and the M40 if you're in a car. If you're uber fit, unlike me, it's a decent walk into the town centre. So walking wise, that's quite good as well to the train station and the main hub. I'm quite impressed with the biodiversity net gain. It's not difficult to have a biodiversity net gain on that site because at the moment it is a concrete block. But I was really interested, I think I read in the report about a a ramp for trapped wildlife, which I don't believe I've ever seen before in a report. So that was quite nice to see, because you do get a lot of animals on that fringe along the A404. We've had the badgers and all sorts and foxes going down there. So I thought that was really good, and I'd never seen it before. So I just wanted to highlight that. I think on the surface, it's an attractive-ish looking building compared to some of the buildings we've had going up recently. I'm a little concerned it's going to look a bit odd against the harsh industrial, but as a standalone building itself, the materials, I think they've done quite well with that. I am impressed that we're going to have some larger 2-bed, 4-person units. I think that's quite a clever way to make sure that there's a property internally sized wise for a larger, you know, family with 2 small children, maybe, to get around the fact that there's no 3 beds in there. Pleased to see the accessible units as well. And I was also pleased to see the comments from the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue. And I don't know whether that's because it's classed as a tall building or that's something we're going forward with each application, but I was quite pleased to see that. I was also pleased to hear about the Section 106 funding to the junction and the road. I think that is much needed. It's been needed for a while, I think, and I think this is just going to tip it over the edge. So it's good to see that in there as well. Moving on to the things I'm not so keen on. I am really struggling with the loss of the protected employment site. Vanwell, which is up the road on the same road, Norreys Road, or Norreys Drive, I think it turns into there. A lot of that has now gone to residential. So we've lost a lot of employment space up there. And it does concern me that if we vote this or approve this application, we're going to then set a precedent on this site, which is then going to cause that site to be lost. And then we've lost all of the employment in that area. So whilst I know we have to take this application on its own, in the back of my mind, that's a bit of a sticking point for me with this. I do have not concerns, but I don't really agree with the comments that have been made about that it's been marketed for 12 months prior. Now, in the report, it said it's 12 months prior to the submission date. The submission date was December 2023. So that means that would have been data from December 22 to 23. Now, I know later at the back end of last year, we've had a move with companies to stop work from home. So I wonder how much that data has now changed if we're basing something on what was after COVID. You know, a lot of people were still working from home. So that's in the back of my mind as well. There's also a comment on in section 10.61 about the housing mix that confused me slightly. It says that it's considered the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom size dwellings are suitable in this location to reflect a town centre living environment. It's not really a town centre living environment, but I kind of get where they're coming from because Phoenix Court, which is opposite, which is raised slightly, that's on a hill, I think they're mainly 1 and 2 beds. I'm just not sure if I can justify the loss of a protected employment site. I'm not sure I agree with the weight being given to that with everything that's going on in that area. But I'm interested to see what other people have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Douglas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Helen. That was really helpful. I've read the report, obviously, and that's a helpful summary of the benefits and the harms from Councillor Taylor as well. And there's just one thing I wanted to pick up on, in agreement really with what Helen just said, is that, I mean, these are quite tall buildings, but tall buildings don't automatically have to ruin the visual appearance of the whole area if they're designed well. I mean, I guess there aren't any developers watching on YouTube. I wish there were, really, because it's a bit of a shame. Because, I mean, these buildings, it's quite a clever design, isn't it? There's as you pointed out in your report, Michael, the change in colour and texture as you go out the building. First of all, it's nice. It looks nice. And secondly, it gives an impression of a variation in height that doesn't really exist. it's an illusion, but that makes the building look a lot less ugly and blocky than it would otherwise. And as I think Councillor Taylor said, it's in stark contrast to some other flats that have been approved or have been built in the area. And I wish they're more like this, just on that design element. So yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just having a look at this air quality area. I mean, I know the area very well. I remember everyone saying it's high, but I remember, you know, back when I was growing up, they had a big block of flats right across the road from this 10-storey tower block that was built in the 60s by Maidenhead Council. It was all bulldozed and knocked down, and it's all low-rise housing now. So it's not unusual. I'm just looking. I picked up the report from SLS on the air quality, and I just want to draw your attention to page 8, 3.3, and it's got a site suitability assessment and a potential exposure. And in there, it says that the proposed development has a potential to introduce future residents to an area of existing poor air quality in consideration of the proximity to the roads and commercial units and associated emissions. I think that is pretty much a given. It is an area of poor air quality. It's bounded on the back end. You've got the A404. You've got Norreys Drive, which is the main drag. Leads into the commercial units, one of the largest manufacturing plants in the area, GlaxoSmithKline, and it's straight onto the M4 motorway. There is an issue there for potential future occupants. Now I don't know. I've looked at it and I've seen that you can have air quality conditioned internally. And I know there's a motion on the table at the moment, and I don't know if Councillor Hill would consider adding a condition in terms of air quality. And I'm thinking of two things. One is an indoor air quality plan. So air quality is monitored internally within the buildings, and the other one is part of the section 106. Potentially an air quality damage cost contribution for consideration. If Councillor Hill would consider that, and the other area.
I'm happy to consider or to include Councillor Singh's air quality comments in a motion to approve it.
Can I just step in there?
Yes.
Can you clarify exactly what you're looking for so I can write it down properly? Sorry.
Yes. So what I'm thinking of is an indoor air quality plan. So it's not unusual, you know, to put in habitable rooms, so some like a monitoring device or something that we can check the pollutants.
Yep, absolutely fine.
And obviously the section 106 is some sort of funds which are ring fence for local mitigation measures, you know, obviously are secured by legal agreement. That would make me a little bit more comfortable. And the other thing is the green infrastructure. I think we're weak there. No disrespect to the officers or applicant, but maybe a green wall. If you can't get it on the land, stick it on the wall or the roof. I mean, I think there can be something can be done there to soften it up and improve the sustainability. Environment. But what we got to think is if this application is approved tonight, you know, years to come, you will have residents living in there, and it's a tricky site. It's the first one out the blocks. I mean, we don't have any housing on that drag at all at the moment. And what we want to do to this evening, if we're going to prove it, we need to prove high quality, highly sustainable, and decent accommodation. So yeah, that's just my offer to council here. You consider adding those two motions on there, and then maybe I can perhaps support Councillor Hill. Thank you.
I'm going to bring Catriona in a second, Councillor Singh.
Thank you.
But just before I do it, did you actually put through that you were seconding it, or are you still?
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Okay, let me
With
bring
those- they're
Catriona
my
back in.
concerns.
If you've got anything else to ask once Catriona's asked some questions, then I'll bring you
Sure.
back in, yeah?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be very clear about the Councillor Singh's enhancement that he's looking to add in, and I'll be with help of the planning officers. But I just want to break it down a little bit, because the land, we have to be very, very clear for the minutes and for the decision taking here in relation to the landscaping enhancement you've referenced. There is a landscaping condition, and there's biodiversity and ecological enhancements condition as well. There's an overlap there, so I just want to be very clear through you, Chair, what Councillor Gertzing's proposing in relation to those matters. And I am concerned about this addition regarding contribution to the Section 106 agreement for air quality mitigation. I just wanted to flag that, because we have to be specific when we're talking about the heads of terms for the Section 106 agreement, and there are some details in the officer report, but we'd have to be very specific about what kind of mitigation fund was being referenced here, and it hasn't been suggested by the environmental health officer. So I'm a little bit concerned about that, Chair, in terms of it being part of the motion, but I welcome Louise's comments.
Can I just jump in for a moment? I was just going to say, I mean, I've just messaged Catriona that where we've managed air quality issues, particularly when I worked in London, it was to have sealed window units and internal mechanical ventilation. Now, I don't think this is something that is needed here. And I'm just aware that the environmental health officer hasn't raised it as an issue. I totally hear where totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And the concerns that you have, but it's coming back to, is this supported by expert advice and opinion? And is there evidence for it? And the air quality assessment is not possibly quite strong enough to support this. That's all I'm trying to advise on.
Let me come back on that bit there. DEFRA, they've got air quality damage cost methodology, which is used by councils. So there is a defined system of working that out. It's planning policy. That's all fine. The SLS report on air quality, without offending anyone, that there is poor, very poor. I could sit here all evening. I could rip the whole report apart. I could rip it apart piece to piece.
Councillor Singh, can we stick on point with the
I'm going to stick on point. The air monitoring, where they've got the figures from, they're nowhere near the site. The report is dated. It was done over 5 years ago. The readings, you know. So when you're looking at that report in its entirety, and you read that report, and you look at the relationship to this particular site, it bears no resemblance. You know, they've picked figures from Frascati Way, and this is right next to the A404. There's going to be far more pollutants here. NO2, PM 2.5, and all of these pollutants. So there are concerns, but look, I'm willing to sort of, by way of condition, if people are living in these properties and we've got the monitors in there, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, because people know that who they're living in, they know the readings and they know the safety. If we can enhance it on site, I'm comfortable with that. But if you're saying to me that report is gospel, then I can pull up the report and I can start reading out paragraph after paragraph, and it doesn't make good listening. I mean, I was quite insulted when I read it, to be honest with you. Quite insulted.
Councillor Singh, can we stick with the conditions? So you're happy with the air monitoring
Thank you.
internally?
That's it, yeah.
And you're happy to second it on that
Thank you,
basis? And
yes.
no other
Thank you.
conditions, yeah?
No.
Councillor Taylor, please.
I forgot something, sorry. I've now lost my page as well, to do with the car park management plan, which is a condition. I'm just trying to get to it now, scrolling. Bear with. I'm getting there. I moved up to make sure I was checking the right data, and then here we go. Car parking allocation and management plan, condition 13. So, which states that no part of the development should be occupied until the car parking allocation and management plan has been done, yada, yada. I'd like to ask if that could be strengthened if the proposer and the seconder are in agreement. We've had this issue at the Loftings with Red Row when the car park management plan was a condition. It was never done. It was never enforced. It's chaos. So is there any way we can actually tighten that up and have the car parking management plan done, dusted, implemented as soon as possible? Because I don't want the same thing happening again, and I know it does. And I know it's not much of a shortfall. There's 67 parking spaces, 76 apartments. But if you've that amount of 2-bedroom apartments, you're going to have 2 cars potentially per household. And I don't want the same thing happening again, because it's caused absolute chaos to over 1,000 residents in Maidenhead already. And this situation could happen again. Can we legally do anything to tighten that up, get it done sooner, make it more if that makes sense? And if so, are the two in agreement to have that
Can I bring in
change
the
added?
officers or Catriona to confirm that it could be strengthened?
No, I'm quite happy. Do you want to-
At the moment, we're happy with prior to occupation rather than it being a pre-commencement condition. Are you wanting it to be a pre-commencement condition? Prior to commencing development, you want...
No, I'm asking if there's anything that can be tightened up in the wording, because we've had this condition before and the car parking management plan was never done and the condition was never enforced, and this estate was discharged without a car park management plan being done, and it's caused chaos. So my question is, can it be worded differently, or can we make sure we don't miss it this time? Because I don't want that happening again on another estate in Maidenhead.
There's a little bit, sorry, I'll just put the speaker on. Looking at the wording, it says no part of the development shall be occupied until a car parking allocation and management plan showing how the car parking facilities and access road turning head within the estate will be allocated and managed has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. It then turns to the development shall be carried out, etc., etc. What it's not saying is when do you implement it? So what we can do is say it needs to be implemented prior to occupation. So it needs to be implemented in full, because basically there's 3 parts to a condition like this. There is the sign off of the details. There then is the time period by which it needs to be implemented, and then it then needs to be maintained. So what's happened here is the completion of implementation is missing. So if we put that in, so basically we get the plan in, nobody's occupying, they implement it, nobody's occupying. Once they've implemented it, then they can occupy, but they thereafter have to maintain what they've implemented. Does that all make sense?
We can do that.
Yeah, everyone happy with that? Because it's just missing that particular trigger, that's all, if that helps. And that way it's an enforceable condition.
We have that, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Hill and Councillor Singh?
Oh, so
Are
sorry.
you happy? You're okay with that? I've got one more speaker, councillor Walters, please, if I could bring you in.
I must admit, I'm quite happy about this application. But I thought what councillor Singh said about, an enhancement. And it could be squeezed in possibly the condition 10. I mean, this is if the developer wants to do it, but I think we're all a bit fed up with these all, massive blocks of flats everywhere. But yes, let's have this one because all the reasons have been explained. They went to an appeal and they got turned down there. Anyway, we got to this point, but let's make it look nicer, for God's sake. All these places look so barren and sterile and not inspiring at all. So sad. They're trying, make it look nice. Can't they put green, I'm not an architect. They put green on the roof or something, green somewhere. You know what I mean? And that included in that, it says it here, there's no condition 10, I think it is. If the proposer agrees. Yeah, under C on page 49, there's notice in writing shall be given to council when the habitat and monitoring, habitat creation and enhancement works. Could get in under there, couldn't it? It's on page 49, Chairman, and C, notice in writing, C. I mean, they make it nice and they sell more money, sell for more money.
Councillor Hill and Councillor Singh,
They're doing it in central
happy
London.
with councillor Walters'
these things.
suggestion?
Chairman,
Yeah.
they're doing all this sort of thing in central London. Making, I know a block of
Yeah.
flats in Mayfair where they're doing that right now. Making it, not just the.
Okay, councillor Walters, just bring Catriona in on that, she just wants to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points on relation to Councillor Walters' just recent suggestions in relation to condition 10. The details of the biodiversity enhancements are to come. So that condition is about details to be submitted for approval. So it's not appropriate. I don't think it's legally sound to interfere with the wording of that condition.
Well, informative then, in an informative.
Because of what it is you would like to see occur. You mentioned a couple of items there, but those details have to come forward if this application is granted. Those details will come forward in the biodiversity and ecological enhancement submissions. But I don't think it's appropriate to put parameters on that at this juncture. In relation to, I think you mentioned green roofs, for example. That was my point in relation to tweaking of condition 10, Chairman. And the other point in relation, I'm sorry to go back to the air quality condition point. I think there'd have to be reasons given for requiring, just to be clear for the minutes, to have some reasons in relation to that, just to be clear on the reasons for the air quality, the air monitoring condition and what that condition would look like. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, there's nothing stopping us putting an informative note whatsoever.
But I'm just going to bring in councillor Singh on the other point, and then I can bring Catriona back in to answer both together. Councillor Singh, you had your button pressed.
Yeah, Catriona, I'm just gonna, this is a paragraph in the report, in the air quality impact assessment. What it says is where the air quality is such that the air quality objective at the building facade is not met, the effect on residents or occupants will be judged as significant. unless provision is made to reduce their exposure by some means. So that in itself is significant. The policy states it is significant. And the report states that this is an area of poor air quality. So what I'm trying to do is mitigate one against the other. So that the condition is justified. I know we want legal officer to come back on it, but I think legal officer is not entirely on the right side of the law on that one. That's all right.
Katrina, can I bring you back in? So obviously there's Gertrude's point.
So I know, Katrina.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, thank you. I just want to be clear what that condition would say, just for certainty for the minutes, because it is you're looking to supplement, I think, Councillor Hill's motion. Thank you.
The wording can be something like prior to occupation, an indoor air quality plan shall be submitted. It must assess the risk from external pollutants, e.g. traffic, NO2, and demonstrate that all habitable rooms will achieve safe air quality standards using passive and or mechanical ventilation systems and be monitored. Or something like around those. You're the experts.
Katrina, would that work? If you could come in, please.
Well, I just like to check in with planning colleagues on the extent of that condition. And the costs of that. We need reasons to back up the condition.
Catriona, hi, we agree with you. It meets all 6 tests in the MPPF about imposing conditions. It seems a robust condition, and I'd be happy to sort of share that with our environmental health officers as well for other applications.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got a president there. Thank you, Michael Chairs. Appreciate that. I mean, what we don't want to do today, we don't want to refuse the application on the air quality because we know what's going to happen. We'll refuse it tonight. It'll go to appeal. The inspector, he'll see the application. He's refused it once on air quality. He'll throw it back at him. And we've got the site left for another 10 years. We don't want that to happen. We want to approve this. We want the site developed. We want to hit our house targets and we want to get back in the 5-year flat balance. So that's what we wanted. We want to work with everyone on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Yeah, I'm just going to bring Katrina back in on that. So Councillor Waters, you wanted to put a formative in, but that's something. Okay. Did you want to?
So I could say, Councillor Waters, that we've got an informative on greening of the environment and building. Yes, if that's still okay with Councillor Singh and Councillor Hill, I've got that written in my motion. If that's okay with Councillor Singh and Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mikey. I've got no other speakers listed, so I think we're good to go to the votes. So.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I will take a named vote to councillors. We have a motion on the table proposed by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Gertsching to approve the application with the conditions listed in the main report, with some amended conditions on air quality and car park management plans, and then the informative on greening of the environment and building. I'll ask councillors if they are for approval, against approval, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Douglas. Councillor Hill? Councillor Martin?
For.
Councillor Gertsching? For. Councillor Taylor? Councillor Waters? That's unanimous, Chair. The motion to approve carries.
Thank you. So that brings me on to the next agenda item, which is for the same site of Highway House, Norreys Drive. Okay, let's take a quick break. No, we're just having a quick break, sorry. Okay, so let's start again. So we're on to agenda item 5, which is also the final agenda item of this evening. Site again of Highway House, Norreys Drive, application number 2302186. If I could hand over to Michael for the presentation of that, please.
Thank you, Chair. This one, same site again, this time for a 68-bed care home on the site in one block. Again, the update sheet. Recommendation to grant subject to a statutory legal agreement, conditions set out in section 15 below. The update, again, it's the lead local food authority have asked for this robust update condition. It's condition 16 shared in the update sheet. In terms of the overview, again, most of the issues we already heard in the previous application. So again, it's a site identified as a protected employment site in policy ED2. We've got the issue of the 5-year housing supply. Louise has said out quite clearly it's 4.7 years and it's getting lower and lower. And in terms of that, we've got to look at the tilted balances applied. So it's unless the harms arising are significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme when taken as a whole, we've got the whole issue of the loss of office use. We've been through the same applies, and the same report has been submitted for both applications. We've also got this appeal decision at Maidenhead Office Park. Now, the inspector there said, although they dismissed the appeal, they said that in terms of we have a surplus of vacant office space that could be addressed in the town centre. So that equally applies to this one. And so the recommendation is that it's approved with conditions on 106. In terms of proposed development, the application site is for a 68-bed care home. That's C2 use class. And in this terms, it's actually almost like an old-fashioned care home because it includes wet rooms and dementia care on the site itself. We're looking at, it equates to a 20-metre high building. In terms of building, it's a contemporary design like the apartment building. This is just one block when we're using light brick and aluminium cladding with openings and balconies would be a grey. Just a few photographs of the site itself, just to give us context. We've got on the left the Volvo office building and on the right Clarion House. You can see Highway House has been demolished. It's been like that for years. Next one, we've got the location of it. You can see quite clearly the houses opposite, the apartments and houses opposite, the bus stop opposite, the cycleway on the right-hand side, highly sustainable location. It provides an attractive option for older people who want full-time care. We're doing a high-quality modern care facility in a sustainable location in Maidenhead with specialist care as well. We're looking at 24/7 care for residents aged 65 and over. The layout has been driven through feedback provided by the officers over the last 2 to 3 years, not just planning officers, but highway officers and environmental health officers too. So the starting point is that the principle of residential-led C2 care home development is considered to be acceptable and in accordance with the development plan policies in the borough local plan. Specific matters include the housing mix and how the C2 care homes would be appropriate on this site. It complies with also with the National Planning Policy Guidance Note confirming C2 care homes on the site and does not generate the requirement for affordable housing provision. So we don't have affordable housing provision on the site. The rooms in the proposed care home are all capable of being used by wheelchair access too. It's a contemporary design, and it would, in our view, enhance the appearance of this part of Norreys Drive. This is the site itself. So you've got the scheme itself against the previous refused development for a 76 apartment block building. This is the design itself. Again, it's modern. We're talking about stone cladding base unit, ground floor and above, and then you've got brick above that, then aluminium cladding on the first floor, on the top floor and roof. Again, it would enhance the whole appearance of this area. And then we've got the transport issues. They're identical. They're identical section 106 and section 278 requirements as we went through for the apartment building in terms of footway improvements, including junction improvements, shopping lanes. So they're absolutely identical in terms of 106 highway improvements. And these are the same plans we saw for the apartment buildings. Again, they've been run past our colleagues in highways. They're satisfied that this would make the scheme even more acceptable in terms of connectivity, in terms of public transport, in terms of pedestrianisation. Again, the site's wholly within flood zone 1, so the flood authority are satisfied with both the flood risk assessment and the drainage strategy, and they've added that more up-to-date, robust condition. So in terms of infrastructure, we're looking at the highway improvements again, and that 49% biodiversity net gain. And so we've got the very similar benefits and harms. The harm being provision of a 6-story building outside the local, and then on the left, all the benefits. It's a purpose-built care home. And it's an old-fashioned, old-style care home for dementia care as well as a wet room. In terms of the evidence that's been provided by the applicant, they provided 2 up-to-date reports about there is a growing need for this, not just for nationally, but for our own district, Windsor and Maidenhead, in terms of ageing population. We've got EV charging points, we've got the net gain, we've got the employment during the construction of the care home, we've got expenditure during the construction of the care home, and all those. So again, the tilted balance applies. It is a residential scheme. It's a residential scheme for 68 units rather than 76 units. And it's a care home as such. And in terms of the benefits, I mean, they outweigh the harm, and both are significant and demonstrable in nature. So recommendation it be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I open this up to the floor, can I bring forward Douglas Bond again to speak? Thank you. When you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Evening again, members. The same points made earlier regarding the use of an unattractive, unused brownfield site also apply to this application. This alternative seeks to meet a different but equally important housing need, namely that for elderly residents in need of nursing care. The nature of that need is now. Elderly people requiring care home accommodation are less able to wait than those in the general population needing accommodation because their needs are immediate. Accordingly, there is an urgency in meeting this unmet need. Invariably, residents that need to go to a care home cannot be adequately cared for in their own homes. It is because of the nature of this need that government policy confirms, and I quote, "It is critical that these needs are met." Your officer's report confirms that the nature and extent of the shortfall in care home provision within the borough is both in a quantitative as well as a qualitative way. In addition to meeting these important needs, the care home will also generate significant new employment and therefore enhance the employment function of the site. And note it currently is devoid of any employment floor space. The council's local plan employment requirement in ED1 is based on numbers of jobs. Accordingly, the proposed care home use with its new jobs will accord with this policy and its objective. This point is also reinforced by the market evidence, which confirms no need for a new office building in this location. As a result, whichever way you look at it, this proposal is consistent with your local plan employment policies. In addition, and as confirmed in government guidance, the care home use will not only contribute to employment needs, but also count towards the council's housing land supply. This adds to the weight and merit behind this proposal.
1 minute remaining.
As to the scheme itself, the scale of the proposed building reflects that of the approved office building and does accord with your policy at QP3 in respect of scale, height and massing. The quality, as I hope you've seen from those slides, ensures that it's a high quality design that will make a positive contribution to the area. The relationship of the care home to all neighbouring uses is also acceptable. All other technical issues have been addressed with no objections from statutory and internal consultees or local residents. In terms of air quality, it's relevant to note also that this proposal will generate less traffic than the extant office scheme or the alternative residential proposal. To conclude, the proposal meets a number of important development plan policy requirements, meets an important need and enhances the character, appearance and function of the site. Accordingly, I hope the application will be supported consistent with the officer recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. So same as last time, guys. So, you know, Q&A session first. I've got speakers up on already. Going first, Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm really struggling with the justification for this care home, and my key struggle is this, and I need the officers to explain it to me. I get the tilted balance, you know. I think we all get the tilted balance, but this is a specialist facility that's being proposed, and the table 12, which on my document is page, it's on 10.32, and the statement there is very, very specific, and it says the current provision of nursing care places is 1,103, and the estimated need is 853. That means we're already over provisioned by 250 units. So, and then we look at residential care, because this is about residential care and nursing care. It says the provision is 302, and the estimate is 305. So we need 3 more places. So I struggle with the whole rationale for this, as to why this needs to be built when we're already over provided. And we say it in the officer's report. And I struggle to see how the tilted balance can apply in this case when it's a specialist building for a specialist activity that is caring for people who need care. So I really need some answers on that one before I put a motion down to refuse, because I can't see why it's here. And this is the officer's report. And you say, the report states an oversupply of care beds, 250 until 2035. See table figure 1 below. So I don't get, frankly, Chairman, I don't get what's going on here.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I feel the same as you on that one. There seems to be some national stats in here, and then the local ones seem to be almost cast aside.
Sorry.
The local ones seem to be cast aside. The figures that we're seeing here, that we're, you know, oversubscribed currently. And there's also a report in here from the Carterwood, is it, that says 4 out of 26 care homes in the borough are classified as outstanding. There's actually more than that on the CQC's website. So there's a few things on those stats. So yeah, I would agree that we need some answers on. Thank you.
And just speak.
Speak loudly, so I
Yeah,
can hear.
I'll do my best. I'm losing my voice, so please bear with me and I'll repeat if you need to hear again.
For you.
Okay. I think the first thing to keep in mind that as of the MPPF in December, our housing needs have shot through the roof. You may all be aware of this, I'm sure you are, but this will include this need. So therefore, given the changes in the housing numbers for this borough, we don't currently have an up-to-date strategic housing market assessment. So some of the figures we have to use predate the changes to the housing figures. So just to give a bit of context. So the figures we're seeing at the moment in terms of borough need may not necessarily reflect where we are today, and we won't know that till we do another SHMA. Until we do another strategic housing market assessment as part of the borough local plan process.
And when are we likely to do that?
I haven't got a time for you, but it'd be within the next year, probably.
Within the next year?
I think because the government, alongside our housing figures going through the roof, they more than doubled. We also, they've changed the rules around the time period for local plan. So there's a 30-month period. So we're going to have to turn it around very quickly. We're currently waiting on the details of how this is going to be implemented. So that's why we haven't actually started on it yet, but we're prepping for it already. But I don't want to go on too much of a tangent there. I just wanted to highlight to you that our housing figures have gone up substantially. But I think of the most I'm sorry, Councillor Waters. I'm doing my best. I'm shouting.
Well, you can shout louder, we don't mind.
I can hear you, yes. Basically, I was talking about the changes to our housing numbers as an outcome of the MPPF that came out in December 24. What it's basically done is more than doubled our housing figures, because it gives a lot more emphasis on affordability. This is pretty true of most of the South East authorities, by the way. And that in turn will affect other types of accommodation provision. But I think more relevant to this case and more pertinent overall is that the provision of care homes, even if it goes above the need numbers that we have, it's very much a developer risk. It's not our risk. We just have to see whether it's acceptable. You cannot refuse an application because of an identified need. What you're trying to do as a local authority, or we're trying to do, is meet that need. If it then exceeds that need, we don't think it's needed, we can't refuse it on that basis, because it's down to the, if the need's met, that's great. But if they then do more on top of that, that's very much at the developer's risk. And it's not something we can refuse on.
If I could stop you.
Yeah,
and
of
ask
course,
to come
that's
back,
fine.
because you're clearly
I'm
going
a
to
bit
say more.
congested.
Can I bring you back in, Councillor Hill? Yeah.
My question and my dilemma is that you're asking us to approve this, and as planning officers and as a borough, the borough can't prove that it needs it. It can't, and it actually proves in the report it doesn't need it. And by our own admission, this SMAR will not be done for another year, so we won't know what we need for another year. In terms of risk, there is a real risk for the borough if we over provide for adult social care. Then residents inevitably come in and take the spaces because they're there to be taken. Then when those residents run out of money, the borough pays the cost. So that has a direct impact on the borough's finances, and it has a direct impact on every council taxpayer in the borough, because taxes will go up, as we keep seeing everywhere across the country. So I think with this, we're in this position, and someone will have to tell me what the planning law is and what the rule book says, where we don't quite know the answer. The report says there's an oversupply. We know we'll calculate the answer in a year's time, so we don't have it now. And we're setting the borough up potentially for a bigger bill than it should really have, because if there's a care place, people will see it, it'll probably be competitively priced and people move in and live there. Run out of cash, end result, council tax goes up. So it's a little bit, in my view, speculative and irresponsible to approve it from where I'm sitting. The planning officer will have to come back to me and tell me off, but I can't vote for it with when the numbers and the report itself is saying we don't need it. And when, as a professional officer, you're saying, look, councillor, we won't know for another year. So I'm thinking it should come back in a year's time, really, when we know what our numbers are. I get the housing supply's gone up dramatically, but we still don't know the effect on adult social care because we haven't projected the numbers of people who will need care. And that number is way out in the future. I mean, it's 2035 and beyond. So I really struggle with where we're going with this tonight.
Thank you, councillor Hill. Yeah, I
Your
find it's
go.
a bit of an unknown. Yeah, it feels like that to me, especially with surrounding boroughs full, if you like, ours not so, you know, or quite the opposite. Then yeah, I'm with you on that. I think Catriona and Louise both wanted to have a word, so I don't know. So Catriona, you're first. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate the point about the commercial risk here to the developer and the applicant is absolutely within their gift to take the risk. If the market is not there, they will have done their own market research in relation to this matter. But as Louise said, and I just reiterate that very, very strongly, that need point is not a reason for refusal. That's the risk of the developer. And the point about the speculation and the concern about the longer term impact on the council's social care funding and picking up the tab, that would not be a robust reason for refusal here, because that is, I understand members' concerns and that they've been aired. We've had some other care home applications where those concerns have been aired. I do understand those concerns, but they're not concrete planning reasons for refusal. That goes to the policy, the national crisis we have with care, with an ageing population, but we can't pin that down to a planning reason to refuse the application. That's my legal advice to members this evening in that regard.
Thank you, Catriona. Yeah, I'll bring in Louise.
I think firstly, if I equate it to housing need, if our housing need figures are 700 dwellings per annum and we achieve 900 dwellings per annum, that is considered a plus. That is considered that we're achieving really well. We're achieving over target. It's fine. If we are delivering 500 units instead of 700, then that is a big problem. But overachieving on targets is not a reason to refuse a planning application. The other thing I would add is that I completely understand where you're coming from to do with the council's financial position. However, it's not a material planning consideration in this case. That comes under other rules, other issues, but it's not covered by policy anywhere. It's not picked up in the MPPF. And in terms, you know, I suppose you could say it has very limited weight, if any. And from that point of view, whilst I know it's a big problem, we need to keep in mind that if it's not material or to the point where the materiality is negligible, we need to be aware of that it won't substantiate a refusal reason. And I think that's really what Catriona was saying. I was just trying to get across how the need works about refusing on need. You just can't do it if they're over providing, because it's back to commercial risk. It's not our risk, it's the developer's risk. In terms of over providing on the targets and in terms of the financial impact on the council, again, no inspector is going to give that any weight, because that is a separate matter outside of planning that we need to resolve. It's not a planning refusal reason. So I do fully understand your concerns, but I'm just trying to give a bit of clarity about our position and the limits of being able to consider this application, and the limits of planning, really. Planning is about land use, it's not about other things. And this just, in the same way that a view isn't a material planning consideration, neither is the financial aspect of this scheme and the impact on the council. So I'm really sorry, but I just have to say it as it is, really.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, can I bring in Councillor Helen Taylor first? Your name is on the list, so you will have your chance to speak in a moment. Yeah, Councillor Taylor,
So
please.
if I can say then.
Councillor Waters,
You're
I'm bringing
further down the
councillor
list,
Hill
Leah.
very quickly back in because it was on his original questions.
Um,
Then I'll go to councillor Taylor. You
it-
do,
it-
and you're on the list, councillor Waters.
I will shut up in a minute. So really, you're saying we're in a position where we sort of know what we might do tonight probably isn't right, but the way the rules work, we sort of had no choice. It's a bit nonsensical, really, from where I'm sitting. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, I'll be very quiet, and I think Councillor Douglas is next.
I
Councillor
know
Ward.
councillor Taylor's next. She's skipped off, but if you go ahead now, councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I mean, it's disappointing that we're being told that, you know, the consideration of the costs might fall to us is not consideration we can make. I mean, I've lost 3 family members to dementia, and I can tell you from personal experience, the last place a family member wants to put someone with dementia is in a care home. They want them at home as long as possible. And that is why you know, there is actually a care home on Larchfield, which was extended year and a half, 2 years ago. And I don't think that's full. And whilst I can see this site as a really good place, regrettably, for residential accommodation, the application previously, you're on the A404 for a care home. I'm not going to scare you with stories of what we went through with our family member that had dementia and the strength they have and what they're capable of and how they can get out with all the best intentions and all the best security. It scares the hell out of me to have a care home that close to busy main roads. I absolutely cannot get my head around it. And we've got a situation here where I think the applicant is hedging their bets and has put 2 applications in for the same site. Now, whilst the previous application, there were a few things I was not happy with, but I've come to terms with the fact that it was a good use of that site with the housing. We're sitting in a situation where we've got a lack of housing supply, which is 4.47, and it should, you know, and we're not using this, but this is something we have to take into consideration with every application, but yet it's not specific enough. So with every application, we're saying, well, we're not meeting the housing supply. These could be 1 beds, they could be 2 beds, they could be 3 beds. We know we need more 3 and 4 beds, but this is being used time and time again for 1 and 2 beds. You know, today I did a search on Rightmove. There were 312 in Maidenhead town centre. That's not a radius, just the town centre available to buy. That is an oversupply. Now I get that, you know, I get what you're saying, but it's so frustrating and something has to change. I'm really not, I can't even consider this application on this site. I really can't. And I don't know what anyone else thinks, but it's going to be something I'm really going to struggle with, knowing what I know. And that road can be quite fast. I mean, the A404 is fast. Norreys Drive is not fast, but it's a well-used road. Shopping-Hangers is that is a massive junction on the Shopping-Hangers going onto the A404 and into Cox Green. And I just can't make, you know what I'm trying to say, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, of course, I read the report very carefully, and Michael's put the table of harms and benefits up again really helpfully in his presentation, and I think it's worth acknowledging some of the benefits of the development that I just want to call a few out that caught my attention. I mean, we do have dwellings proposed, and we need dwellings. We've got a massive housing supply issue in the borough. We've got to acknowledge that. They tick the box for the carbon offset payment. So ultimately the site is carbon neutral, which is policy compliant. On the supply question, I will come back to this. I mean, I take the officer's point that even if there was an oversupply, you know, that's not a harm. Louise has made that very clear. That's a development risk for the developer. It's not specifically a harm, but yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. But also, maybe most importantly of all, this is previously developed land. it's brownfield, it's sitting there having no economic use at the moment. I don't know if it's, obviously it's a car park, but it's, it's not, well, it tend to be offices, that's not happening. But having said all that, having looked at those benefits, I want to come back to Councillor Hill's point about the supply on one technical detail. Do we have, this is a question for officers, do any of the policies that we've adopted or the MPFF make any specific reference of wet rooms in particular? And do they? Is that a policy question? So the Carter Wood report, I'll just quote it. We have provided an analysis of net need for care home bedrooms providing full ensuite wet rooms. Just not ensuite wet rooms, which we consider a more relevant measure than just ensuite, presumably. So this specific issue of wet rooms, is that a policy question or not?
Come on now, wet rooms, is that a policy?
The wet rooms is something that the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, seek when they want to have excellent or outstanding accommodation. So you can't meet that standard unless you have wet rooms. So it's more of a CQC requirement rather than our requirement. But there is a bit of an issue in terms of trying to ensure that the care home provision we have in the borough makes the best quality standards we can achieve.
So it's not a material planning consideration?
It has some weight in terms of the quality. When you look at the quality of the accommodation, it would have some weight, but it wouldn't be significant.
So, yeah, I mean, this is why I'm raising the question. The Carter Wood report effectively, by its own admission, rests very heavily on the provision of wet rooms. In fact, they say that we consider that a more relevant measure and they downplay the other measures. So this is the need they've identified. Really the whole sort of argument they're building up is about wet rooms. With the other report, the Knight Frank one, I was reading this report quite late before the meeting, the Carter Wood, and I tried to find the Knight Frank one and couldn't find it. Is it on the planning portal?
The report?
Knight Frank report's referenced in the officers' report.
Yes.
But I can't find it.
Is it not on the planning portal? Not the planning portal. I can't remember what it's called now. It slipped my mind. Planning access or whatever it's called. Yeah. On the council's website, if you search the application, you get a list of the documents submitted. So it
yes, that's how I found the Carter Wood report.
Yeah,
but
so
I can't find
it
the
should
Knight.
be, unless we're referring to a wider report that's is an advisory report at national level.
Okay. Well, either way, I couldn't find it.
Knight
I
Frank
couldn't read
reports.
it.
When, for example, when we did the Hollyport appeal, we were using some of the national published reports on that. So
Right.
sometimes we'll use and refer to those.
So the Carter Wood report has a local relevance, and the Knight report, Knight Frank might have a more
But yeah,
national,
so some of them are
broadest perspective.
on a bigger scale.
Okay. I mean, so my big problem there is, as Councillor pointed out, our own sort of needs analysis doesn't show the need. I understand your point, very valid point, that that's a developer risk, but it does take it off the list of benefits. So as councillors, when we're weighing up the benefits and the harms, if there isn't a need, we don't put that in the benefits column. So it does affect our deliberations with the proviso. Obviously, it's not a reason for rejecting. It doesn't move into the harm column, but it does move out of the benefit column if there isn't a need. So, I think we do have to consider that.
For a point, please keep in mind that when you deliver C2 accommodation, the government has a calculation that equates it to a certain proportion of general dwellings.
1.9.
Yeah, that's it. So there is a number, there would be a number associated with this. I don't have it to hand, but it would be somewhere in the 20s.
That's right. I understand that. So that's a different benefit. So that's the benefit.
Yeah,
just
so I
provided.
was just going to mention that it's not as if it doesn't equate, and add to our housing land supply issue. So it does have, because that is something
Well, I have
we
a
can use
question
for
on that
that.
as well.
So just as an aside.
So my question on that is, I mean, if this was like 2-3 dwellings on that site, you call it underdevelopment, and in tilted balance, that would actually tilt us against it, underdevelopment. So even more than it would in level balance. And I think we've got some evidence that there are, there's the possibility of having 76 flats on this site, So in my mind, I'm wondering at what point we consider 35 equivalent dwellings to be under development, or at least less important in terms of the tilted balance. But it's just a thought. I think that we've got to take that into consideration as well. We're actually going to be harming our housing supply potentially by consenting the scheme by the government's own sort of designated metric. I've got one more thing to say, if that's all right, Chair. I've got an additional concern about the scheme as a whole, the way it's designed in terms of quality for as a care home. So the care inspector has a design guide. They publish a design guide, and there's a couple of points on that which I feel are in conflict with the design of this this site. So one, I don't know where it is in the design guide, but we can look this up later. Access to local facilities. The premises should be sited in areas suitable for domestic living and should avoid non-domestic locations such as industrial or retail sites. I know this is an employment site, but I think that's probably under the broad umbrella of not being ideal in that design guide. And secondly, and I guess more obviously, premises should be single story where possible. From the report, accommodation in this development is provided at first, second, third and fourth levels in a 6-story building. So, I mean, again, not ideal. And given Councillor Taylor's points about the proximity of major roads, I mean, it all adds up to me. It feels like this is an unsuitable location for this design of care home. And yeah, I'd like to put a motion forward to reject on that basis, Chair.
Councillor Waters, did you want to speak? No. No need, okay. Councillor Singh?
I think most of the stuff I was going to say has been said. Yeah, I've sort of got, I've got concerns about this one as well. And sort of the process, because we've got a fallback position now, because departments have just been approved, the 76 units, and now we're in a position of deciding on this application. Less units, less occupants. So then we look at is it a better use of land? Or are we removing potential dwellings from that site? So that's one of my concerns. The other one is on design. I think the previous approved design is a lot better. It's a lot more striking, especially in that context on that street. It's more of a statesman sort of signature building. So for those reasons, I mean, I'm leaning towards supporting colleagues for refusing this application. It's commendable the developers taking the commercial risk on this, but I'm sort of leaning back again towards my the air quality in the area. This area, it's a known area of poor air quality. We know that from obviously the previous application. It's more significant with this application because what we're doing here is we're exposing residents, vulnerable residents, elderly residents to pollutants and poor air quality. These guys, they're going to have underlying health issues. We know that by the application. It's in contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework. Councillor Douglas has alluded to that, paragraph 186, and also the BLP EP3, the air quality. So I think for those reasons, I've got to reluctantly support colleagues on this one. I don't like knocking these applications out. The applicant's been very patient with the borough, 2 years It's not acceptable to wait 2 years for a planning decision. I know resources are stretched, but we've got to get through these a lot faster. But yeah, that's where I am. In good conscience, I've got to support colleagues on this, and we've got to refuse this application. Thank you.
I agree with you on the air quality on this one, because people with dementia suffer respiratory issues. It's one of the symptoms of the disease. Just to clarify, you are seconding Councillor Douglas's motion. Is that correct from what you were saying there?
As for refusal, I thought it was already seconded. Was it?
I've only got
No.
Councillor Douglas down as
Okay.
proposal.
Yes, I'm happy to second Douglas' motion if he's okay for me to second it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Can I just bring in Louise quickly?
Thank you, Chair. Should this refusal go through, what I want to do is, I've had various suggestions from different councillors. And what I want to do is pin down the refusal reasons we're talking about. Sorry, oh, I'm really sorry about that. It might be. Can you hear me now? Yep, so if I speak really close to it, it works. All right then. What I wanted to say was different councillors have said different things, and what I want to pull together before we go to the vote on this motion is what are all the grounds, because different people have suggested different things and I'm getting a bit confused. So if we could just run through it so I can do a list, then that would be very helpful.
Councillor Taylor, can I bring you back in?
Thank you, Chair. Just going to say two things. I can't see that report on the portal anywhere, the Knight Frank. The others are there, but that one is not, that I can see, unless it's under something very bizarre. I can't see it. The other thing I was going to say actually is that if on the slide 5 that we keep going back to, the benefits and harms, I'll paraphrase because there's 3 conditions on the benefits that say something like, and I am paraphrasing because the slide's not up there. There were 3 at the bottom. It was like creation of employment in the construction, incidental expenditure in the borough during the building phase, and incidental expenditure in the borough during moving in, blah, blah, blah. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the drift. They're only short-term benefits, and those benefits are on every single site that's developed in the area, regardless, mostly. So I really struggle to see how they could be listed as a benefit, because it's not an ongoing benefit, when things like the loss of an employment site, which is protected, isn't on the harm side. And I just wanted to point that out. I don't think that the benefit and harm thing, that you can see it so many different ways. People are going to view things different ways. I personally don't see how a short-term gain in expenditure and employment while something's being built, which could only be a year, can be seen as a full benefit of the development, if that makes sense, especially if we're saying the loss of a protected employment site isn't going to be listed as a harm. So I just wanted to point that out. And I don't know if you have managed to find that, Knight Frank, but I can't see it on there unless I'm going a bit blind, which is possible, to be fair.
And I agree with you, Councillor Taylor. It's like how something we don't need is also a benefit in that sense. And that's something I find quite confusing. Are we able to tie up some refusal reasons? I know a few of you had things to say. So particularly, let's start with the proposer and seconder. So we've got some clear points that we can go through.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So yes, I'm proposing we reject on the basis it's an inappropriate location for this design of care home. And the factors there are the sort of non-compliance, if you like, with the Care Inspectorate Design Guide. The factors here, just to list them, are like non-compliance with the Design Guide, saying they should be avoided. Non-domestic, it's the Care Inspectorate Design Guide.
That's what you said, recommended 1 to 2 stories, wasn't it?
well, single story where possible. Obviously, that's
Yeah.
not going to always be possible,
But
but
not
this is, yeah, accommodation starting on the
That's,
second floor.
an idea. Okay.
But also the avoidance of non-domestic locations being, offered as a preference. The report also says it should be close to local NHS facilities such as GPs and dentists. I actually don't know whether it is or it isn't here.
There are some around that way. Yeah.
On large ones. And then we did have, I'm interested to hear your opinion, officer opinion on this, but we had Councillor Taylor's point about the proximity to the major road. And Councillor Singh's point about the air quality, the unique air quality issues because of the proximity to the dual carriageway and the RCR site.
Yeah, it's an area of known poor air quality and it's exposed to vulnerable residents.
Is that true?
Yes, it's in the report.
So it's an area of known poor air quality in the report. And because the residents here are going to be extremely vulnerable.
Councillor Singh, I can bring you in if you want to
Yeah, okay.
speak.
I mean, it's in the applicant's report. I mean, it's an area of existing poor air quality, and in policy that is judged as significant. So that's in itself significant enough to reject the application. And then I was going to say, Councillor Douglas has mentioned about the design is of poor quality. And the previous one is obviously a lot more striking and better use of land previously. And obviously we've got the fallback position, the 76 apartments, given that we've got a 5-year house and land supply shortage and a shortfall, we should be optimising good brownfield sites like this and maximising density. This development doesn't do that. It falls short there.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. I'm going to bring in Catriona. She wanted to say a few words before I go to any other points that people may have.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be very clear with members about my earlier advice and apologies. I just want to clarify my advice on the need point because I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't reference the NPPF in this regard, and I know we've moved on from that, but just for the record, because there absolutely is a matter for the developer in order to take, if they wish to take the commercial risk around care, but the NPPF does make reference to decisions and policies having regard to efficient use of land, which does have regard to the identified need. And the point about this application here is that the applicant has sought to identify that need in their own way. I know we've touched on, members have touched on the reports that have been referenced in the officer report. And I know there's a conflict there with the local authority, the council's own figures, but I would just comment, and as it has been commented on in the officer report, that the applicant's figures and research are more up to date. So I just make that point to be very clear with members to supplement what I said earlier on in relation to commercial risk. But I will. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair. And I may step back in relation to the reasons that are being discussed in a minute.
That's fine, Catriona. I can bring you back in. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I was just going to say that one of the reports is not on the portal, so we haven't been able to see it. So people are saying the stats are different to ours and the stats are more up to date. But if we haven't been able to find the report to read it, we're kind of missing a huge chunk of information, aren't we? So that makes, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. If I could just step in there, Chair.
Thank you, Catriona.
Sorry, just the think just to think about members' roles in the committee this evening, you have your officers' report, and the officers' conclusions in relation to those reports are in the officer report. So I appreciate members don't have that report to hand, but the officer has assessed those reports in his examination of the application and his provision of the recommendation this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catriona, but I think I found myself that when there's discrepancies, you can't, read up and check one against the other, and that's the problem that we're having making decisions. I'm going to bring Councillor Taylor back in because it was her point initially.
Sorry, I just wanted to, and I don't mean to be antagonistic when I say this, but when we're working with the tilted balance, it's been acknowledged that things can be weighted differently, and we need all the facts. We need to be able to see all the facts in order to weigh things as we consider it. That's the whole point of tilted balance. So if we can't see one of the reports, I get what everyone's saying, but the facts need to be on the portal for us to consider. We don't just read the officer's report. We go and we look at the portal, we look at the plans, we look at the objections, we look at what the consultees have said, like Maidenhead Civic Society, etc., etc. It's not just a case of we blindly read the officer's report and then we come to panel. So I just want to be clear that I think it's very important that all the information should be on the portal. And if it's not, then obviously, there's going to be discrepancies, and we're not going to be able to explain those discrepancies, and we're not going to be able to form an opinion, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Let me move this closer. Here we go. Right, firstly, the Knight Frank report is a national report. And yes, I agree, perhaps we could have referenced it better and given you a link or similar. But it is around demand and need and so on. And as we've said before, although we do monitor demand and need, and the evidence seems to indicate that demand and need has increased, ultimately, when making a planning decision, if the need is met and this goes in addition to the need, then that's not a reason to refuse. It's still okay. It's still, it just provides more facilities. So it's not, same as with housing, if you've met target, you don't just say no to everything after 700 or whatever, because it then creates more resilience in the provision. So it would never be supported by the inspectorate to use a target as a cap. It's there to achieve and exceed if you can. So it's being looked at the wrong way around. So yeah, we don't treat housing targets as caps, and we don't treat C2 as caps. We treat them as targets, and we hope to do better than the targets. That's essentially it in a nutshell. I hope that helps explain the need and delivery side of things.
Do you want to come back, Helen?
With that explanation, but I guess my ultimate point is I don't agree that this should be treated the same as housing, because if we go above our housing targets, there's no cost to us, to the borough, on our finances, whether it's on a care home. If people run out of money, there is going to be a cost to us. So I think they're quite I know what you're saying, it's not planning consideration or etc. But logistically, and if you look at it logically, they're two different things. One's going to cost us money, one's never going to cost us money. It doesn't matter if you build 300 houses above target, it's not going to cost the finances of the borough money in the long run. It's going to make us money in the long run because the council tax. A care home potentially could attract people from out of borough, then we're liable for the costs when they can't afford it anymore. So it just, I don't understand how the powers that be have made those similar when they're so not similar. And it doesn't aggravate me, but it blows my mind that the fact that this could potentially end up costing the borough finances a lot of money can in no way be taken into consideration. It's just bonkers, in my opinion. I've finished now. Thank you.
No, I agree, Councillor Taylor. It's something that I can't fathom either. Councillor Douglas, I'll bring you in.
I mean, we are, yeah, I mean, can it be noted? I mean, we're not proposing that we reject this application on the basis that this is a harm. as you said, it's not a harm. Can it be noted, though, that we are questioning the level of demand for such a facility? And I mean, the officers, Michael's urging us actually, just to come back to Helen's point and Catriana's response about the missing Knight Frank report. Yeah, it's a national report. We maybe could have Googled it or something, but just to come back, I'm really supportive of what Councillor Taylor is saying there, because Michael himself is urging us to read it. So we're reading the officer's report, and the officer says, I'm urging you to read it. If you're questioning the demand for such a facility in this area, I urge you to consider these reports. And that's exactly what we are doing. We're questioning the demand in the area.
I very much hear what you're saying. I'm just conversing with Catriona actually. And I think the suggestion that she's made, and I agree with, is that if members feel they need to see that report in order to make a decision, I would suggest perhaps we defer this evening for the opportunity for all members to have sight of the report, be able to read it and digest it. And then when that's happened, we'll come back again.
Can I suggest a reason not to defer, but it's obviously up to members to decide that. A reason not to defer is that, as you've explained, as officers have explained, it's the Knight Frank report is a national report, and the Carterwood report is a local report. So of the two, anyway, I think if we've read the Carterwood report and we know it inside out, we probably have got a picture of where the applicant's coming from. And any national figures are only going to be supportive in a much broader, looser sense than the Carterwood report anyway. So yeah, I personally am happy to keep the motion to reject on the table, but yeah, open to what officers have to say on that.
I think it's a fair point that the report isn't linked. So we've only just found out as a national report in this meeting, rather than having access to that within the report in the first place. I mean, that's just another point to bear in mind. Can I bring you in, Councillor Singh?
I just think we've got to make a decision this evening, really. In the interest of expediency. I mean, the application's been hanging there for over 2 years. It's a long time for a planning application to be sitting there. It's not good practice to defer the application at this juncture. I think we've got to make a decision. We've got sound planning reasons for refusal. We have, not including that, the air quality, significant harm in itself is enough. The poor quality design, the use of land, the fallback position, the 76 flats. We've got significant reasons here and concerns with this application to refuse it this evening. That's all I really want to say. I think it's fair on the applicant, and we'll get to the same spot if we defer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. So I've got no one else registered to speak, no other motions on the table. So I think, can we run through the refusal? Louise can go through that. Sorry. I think we've got no other motions on the table, Louise. So I think we've got the one to refuse.
Absolutely.
If we could go through the refusal reasons and then make sure everybody's happy, and then we can go to a vote.
And has all been agreed, which is inappropriate location for a care home according to a care inspectorate design guide. Obviously, I'll flesh these out a bit more, but that's the summary of that one. The second one relates to proximity to major roads and air quality issues, in that it's in an area of existing poor air quality, and this is significant enough to reject the application. I'll phrase that better, but also vulnerable users, I think I've got in here. So because of the type of residents.
And dementia, that's a lot of, that is Chester's is some, particularly with dementia, I'd say.
Yeah. And the final one is design is of poor quality and the application does not make best use of land. I might split those ones when I write them up, if you're okay with that, but that's what I've got written here. And I've noted here is that the fallback is on a residential permission. But I've noted that it won't go in the refusal reason because it wouldn't be appropriate. But that's sitting there. So that's what I see, I've written down here to move forward on.
Does the one about poor design, does that mention about single or, two-storey as recommended, is that in that one?
No,
I
which,
wonder that could maybe add that. Where it says, poor quality, and, councillor Douglas reference about the single story, maybe that could go in that for design section.
right.
And where did you find that again? What was
Is
the
that?
same place as the other one?
It's the, Inspector Design Guide,
Yeah.
the single story,
It's recommended, yeah.
care quality design guide. I'll have to look that one up. So I normally deal with the care quality commission stuff, but I'm not come across that one. Thank you.
Is everyone happy with those? Did you want to read them? We've just run through them really quickly and then we can go to the vote, yeah.
Inappropriate location for care home. This falls under the Care Inspectorate Design Guide. Proximity to major roads and air quality issues. Mindful that it's an area of existing poor quality, poor air quality, and that the building will be occupied by vulnerable users with dementia who are particularly susceptible to air quality challenges. The design is poor quality and not best use of land, and furthermore, the Care Inspectorate Design Guide states that care homes should either be single story or two-story at most. Yep. Does that sound about right to everybody?
Where possible, yeah.
Where possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we happy with that then? So,
Okay.
go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so just to clarify, we have a motion on the table to refuse for the reasons that have been outlined by the Deputy Head of Planning, proposed by councillor Douglas and seconded by councillor Gurj Singh. I'll now go to a name vote, councillors, and I will ask you whether you are for refusal, against refusal, or abstaining from the vote. So with that, councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Hill. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Gurj Singh. For. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Walters.
Oh.
So that's 5 for, 1 abstention, chaired, so the motion carries.
Thank you. That is actually our last agenda item. We don't have any appeals on this one tonight.
No.
Nope, so the meeting's closed.
Because
Thank
it's
you.
Extraordinary.
It is.
Don't
Yep.
want to put them on for those. So, yeah,
Thank you.
everybody. That's not too bad.